Okay, my loves. I know there are a lot of you that are out there that are really wondering, how do I even set boundaries anymore? Maybe you didn't grow up with great boundaries. Maybe boundaries weren't really modeled well for you, or maybe you were told that you cannot have boundaries. Maybe you're tired of being gaslighted in your relationships, and you're tired of feeling crazy all the time and guilty for trying to make a difference in your life. If this is you, then I want you to come schedule a call with me. Let's chat about the Unashamed Image Program. The Unashamed Image Program is geared towards you specifically. I am going to be helping you in our next upcoming session of the Unashamed Image. I am personally going to train you how to not feel crazy when someone is gaslighting you, how to be able to stand your ground, to keep your boundaries intact, and to also see through the bull crap. I am also going to be teaching you how to set really confident boundaries that you can really rely on. And I'm going to help you communicate them in a way that really makes sense. Basically, I'm going to help you live a life free of shame and on your terms. If you are ready and you are done feeling all the shame and guilt for trying to set boundaries, if you are not willing to live another moment the way you are right now and in somebody else's shadow, then this is the time to schedule that call with me. It's completely free, no pressure, just love, just support. Go to www.erinandersonthetraumacoach.com. Scroll down the page to where it says, Let's Chat About Working Together. Click on that button and it'll take you to my booking page. If you're ready to live the unashamed life, schedule that call. Let's get you in the Unashamed Image Program, my loves. From my heart to your heart. Bye. Welcome to the other side of the struggle. This is a podcast where we talk about trauma, how to heal it, and then how to take it and use it to unlock your mission and your potential, and to use it to live your very best dream life. When you're dealing with betrayal trauma, it can be hard to know how to heal it, how to stop the pain, and to know what your next steps are to take in your own life. And these are the questions that we try to answer here. Trauma has the ability to rob us of our joy and identity, which is why it's so miserable to experience. But with the right tools and with the right mindset, we can totally reclaim that joy and even use this trauma to strengthen ourselves, so that way trauma does not knock us off of our joy again. Living your dream life should be a non-negotiable, but trauma tends to try to negotiate that with you. And even though trauma is not something that we will completely ever be free of in our life, the pain is negotiable. This is why I created Erin Anderson Betrayal Trauma Coaching and this podcast, is because I want my listeners, I want my clients to live, truly live free from the prison that trauma can put you in. I want you to live on the other side of the struggle. Okay, I want you to stop what you're doing right now for just a minute, and I really want you to hear me out. I want you to go right now to erinanderson.kartra.com/page/heart of gold. There you are going to find a free meditation just for you from me
This meditation is amazing. Let me tell you a little bit about what it's going to give you. Okay? Number one, it's going to help boost your confidence. If you are dealing with trauma, then you are most likely dealing with a confidence issue as well. And it's something that you are really, really wanting back. Number two, it is going to help you find security in your situations in your life because it's going to help you gain a sense of self-love and some self-trust. The third thing this is going to give you is an ability to escape the trauma that you're experiencing right now, this very minute, and help you find peace and joy and love and a deep appreciation for you and your experiences. This is going to really help you reconnect with yourself. So, that is very, very, very important when you are dealing with healing from trauma. So, again, I'm going to tell you what that website is that you need to go to. erinanderson.kartra, KARTRA.com/page/heart of gold. Capital HEARTOF, capital GOLD. Go check out this meditation. Please claim it for yourself because it is 100% a gift from me to you to help you heal right now from trauma. All my love.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Other Side of the Struggle. I'm so excited for this week as well for our guest speaker, Jenny Layton. She's back. If you guys haven't already listened to her previous episode with me, we talked about organization a couple of months ago, actually. And if you look through the podcast episodes, you'll see in there Jenny Layton before. But I wanted to bring her back today to actually talk about intention. Because as you guys know, this is one of my first pillars of my program where we take intention and we start using it to actually form your life back. Like one of the things I hear my clients say all the time is, I want my life back. I want to remember who I was. I want to be a whole new person. I don't want to be who I am now, and I don't want the trauma to rule my life anymore. And that takes getting really, really dialed in and intentional. And where Jenny is just so amazing at helping to eliminate the clutter and helping to get things back on track. That is like what she is so gifted on, and how intention is so directly linked to getting some boundaries set, some organization around those boundaries, and some organization around the resources that are being sucked dry from all this trauma that's happening to. I just really wanted to have her to come back in and chat with us about how we can start getting intentional and we can start organizing our lives again. So, Jenny, thank you so much for hanging out with me again today. I'm so excited.
I am too. It's always so fun to be here. Your audience is amazing. Your message is amazing. So thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you. I just love you. You're just amazing. Okay. So, Jenny, I'm going to ask you this question. Intention. You know, we've been talking a little bit about intention and how it does require starting to set some boundaries and starting to set some organization in your life. Because, you know, when I know for me personally, when I was going through my healing journey, I was so sucked dry from the trauma that I was experiencing that sometimes like getting goals and setting goals and thinking about the things I wanted to create just seemed overwhelming and seemed so exhausting because I just didn't have a lot to give to it. So, what would you say to someone who's like, I know I need to be intentional. I know I need to get some things organized. I know I need to set boundaries, but I'm just exhausted.
Right. So that's a really real place to be. This is a good conversation to have because I think we fall into the trap of thinking it needs to look a certain way. When we think about goals and what living that really productive, creative life looks like that we ultimately want, we're probably envisioning something that is 20 steps ahead of where we are right now. And that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice to have a long-term vision, but we got to build a bridge between where we are and where we want to be. And so my clients, one of my mantras is small plus specific equals success. And that just means we're going to take real small steps and focus on one little thing at a time. And that can be hard because we want to see a lot of change, right?
Yeah.
But in this situation that people find themselves in with trauma or other just really hard situations, your bandwidth is really limited for anything outside of survival. And sometimes just even the smallest little goal, the smallest little thing that you set with intention can have such big impact because it's just that little spark that you needed, to just kind of catch fire and help you start to feel like you have that power to move forward. And so, yeah, where to start? Start really small and really specific. That's where you're going to see some growth that matters.
So, how do you feel about boundaries? It's a legitimate question. A lot of people come to me really struggling with this concept. They often feel guilty for setting boundaries, or they're not sure about even what a boundary is. They've heard the term, set the boundary, things like that, but that's really confusing for them because it's not something that's well taught in our society nowadays, right? They know that boundaries are really important to having healthy, constructive, supportive, and wonderful relationships, but why? And oftentimes they also know that they feel like their boundaries are being violated, but they can't quite pinpoint what the boundary is that's being violated. That's why I've created the Clarifying and Creating Your Boundaries free PDF. You can find out what your boundaries are, how to tune in to what the boundary needs to be, and how to effectively create and communicate your boundary so that way you stay in this place that respects you, respects the other person, but also gives you the confidence in your boundaries so that way you stop being gaslighted, disrespected, and unseen. Having your boundaries really clear gives you a voice and also helps the other person stay in accountability with themselves. So that's not a role that you have to take on anymore. So if you are ready to really have clear boundaries, to really understand what your role is in the boundary, and to give yourself some safety and some protection against people that might try to gaslight you or are just being disrespectful, go grab my Creating and Clarifying Your Boundary PDF at erinandersonthetraumacoach.com. And while you're there, let's schedule a call with me. Come have a chat with me so that way I can really help you master this particular skill, creating boundaries, clarifying the boundary, communicating that boundary, and so that way I can also help you have relationships that show up to support you, cherish you, and love you. Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. And, I totally understand that. As I've been thinking back to like my journey and where I was at the very, very beginning of it, this idea of being where I'm at now was like, oh my gosh, like so overwhelming. And I think that, personally, I guess I can't blanket statement this because I feel like there's so many different ways to experience trauma and so many different reasons why we don't know what we want out of
Right.
life. And one of them being that we are so focused on the things that we don't want,
Right.
But like you said, taking small steps, I realized for me, like one of the things that I did want was peace. I wanted joy and I wanted to do whatever it took to get there. And I think that we see those 20 steps ahead, especially as women, we put so much pressure on ourselves. And
Mhm.
so if we're doing like this 20 steps ahead kind of a thing, I think that when somebody asks us, what is it that you want to create? We see that image and we're like, oh, I don't know. Because I really
Right.
like that feels so overwhelming. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you said that strikes me is that you knew at that point that what you wanted was just some peace.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. So that's a really good piece of information to have. Everything that I coach on, I always use organizing stuff as an analogy because I feel like we talk about some really big ideas and intangible concepts that they make sense, but it's sometimes a little bit hard to understand. And so I like to use an analogy that when you're organizing your space because everybody gets that, right? So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
use an organizing analogy and I think maybe it
Let's
will
do
help.
it. Let's do it.
So when I'm organizing a kitchen for someone, it can be quite overwhelming because everything's pulled out of all the cupboards. We've got all these piles of things. They're sorted and gone through. But when it comes time to start putting it all back away, you want to do it right. You're not sure where to start. And so it can feel really overwhelming. And so I just kind of coined this little mantra, start with what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that in that situation, you always know where the utensil drawer is supposed to go. It's that really convenient drawer close to the dishwasher, close to where you set the table. So start with that. And then the next thing you know, where the cups go is pretty logical. It's going to be probably close to the dishwasher and close to the sink. So piece by piece, you start fitting that back together. But I can't get to where the mixing bowls are going to go until I followed that order of where the utensils go and then the cups and then probably the plates and bowls. And it just kind of unfolds that way. And so I'm just going to, trace back to what you said, where you're like, I want some peace, and pair that. Start with what you know you want peace. Great. That's where we want to start. And then let's pair that with the phrase small plus specific equals success. So yeah, you want peace. Specifically, what is that going to look like for you right now? What do you want to focus on today or this week or even this month? Is it prayer? Is it journaling? Is it some meditation? And I don't know the different kind of tools you offer your clients.
No,
So whatever
lots.
those things might be.
All of the above.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think those are really great tools.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever that is, whatever way that you feel like you're going to best get peace, let's get really specific around that. And then there you go. You've
Yeah.
got that intention you're creating small, but I want you to think about what that peace is going to do for you as you free up that bandwidth that's tangled in something else and now is in peace. You're opening up more space for yourself to focus on the next thing that you want,
Yeah.
According to the analogy now, where do the cups go?
Yeah, where do the cups go? Exactly.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, when I was going, like, this wasn't like super intentional action. And so I'm not saying like, to my listeners to just do this, but I knew I wanted peace. And so what I would do, and I'm not like, okay, backing up for just a second, with what I'm saying, I'm not judging myself or my past self for what I did or anybody else who feels like they have to do the same thing. But when I got to a point where I was so overwhelmed, like this idea of I was just so overwhelmed and so feeling so broken and that my needs were not being met, that I would finally just like explode with emotion and get super angry, and I would storm out the door and go get in my car and I'd drive away and I wouldn't be back for a few hours. And I'm not judging that. Like, that was my pursuit of peace then,
Right.
you know? But if we're going to get specific about this, one of the things that I think would be like super powerful in, doing that simple thing, and it probably would have been a little scary for me, but it would have given me a lot more of a powerful impact, is if I made that, not the anger part, but just made it a habit to get out of the house, to get away from all of the chaos and all of the emotion and all of the stuff that was creating the trauma for me at this point. And I just simply voiced it, and I let my family know, hey, on this day, at this time, I'm out of here.
Right.
You guys can do what you need to do, but I'm gone. And I do that now. Every single week I have a night off that I go and I get to read a book, or if I want to sit in the bathtub for 10 hours, I do. I go get myself some food that I really want, and it's just like a day to really pamper myself. And I feel like when somebody's asking for peace, they also are asking for some care.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Well,
And
so
go ahead.
oh, sorry.
Go
Well,
ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there's just another little tool here that I can offer that will help you identify what that self-care is going to look like. Because as you're mentioning, leaving the house and taking some time to yourself, that's a perfect solution if that's what's lacking in your life right then.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not what's lacking in the life of a listener, then the principle beneath that is asking yourself, what is it you need? And I follow up with what's missing. And those two questions are so strategic, because what it does is it gives you that opportunity to have that self-care, but you're asking yourself, that's
Right.
kind of this personal prescription of what is it that I am feeling the need for right now. Sometimes, and you mentioned a lot of different things. Maybe it's a bath, maybe it's a nap, maybe it's going out and getting some food, whatever that's going to be. Sometimes you're so upside down, you don't know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with clients before where they felt like they were meeting their need, but it ended up missing the mark because it wasn't exactly what they thought. They thought they needed something, but it wasn't exactly what they needed. And so that follow-up question of what's missing is incredibly helpful, because you can zoom out and look at your life and recognize, I've been on the road, or I've been busy, I've been running errands every day. What I really need is some time at home. That's what's missing. Not a date with my husband necessarily, not going out with the girlfriends or whatever, who that could seem like a really great self-care thing. But to make sure that you're hitting the mark with what it is you're doing for self-care, I really like to ask those questions. First, what do you need? And then second, what am I missing? Am I missing a meal? Have I not eaten well today? Am I missing some movement? Have I been really sedentary for a while? Because those are the things that are really going to give you that self-care. And so, you talked about having habits and having something regular to do. And we've been talking about this small plus specific equals success. And I recommend generally setting up some specific habit that will allow you to stay on top of your life and not kind of get bogged down. But I think when you're looking for peace, there's almost just kind of this extra layer that you can add in the moment. And that's when you start to feel that emotion bubbling up. You start to feel that tension.
Yeah.
You pull out those questions. What do I need? And what's missing? And that allows you to self-correct a lot faster. So you don't reach that point where you're just bubbling over and need to take off in anger. And so just a few different ways to address that self-care and to help establish that peace in your life.
I love that. I love that. And I love how you were talking about, have I been active? Have I had a nap today? Have I taken care of myself? Because, for me, I think back to myself when again, at the beginning of my healing journey, I feel like there was so much anger there. The first thing I would have said would have been like, I need my husband to quit being or something like that. But I mean, you're actually talking about steps that we can control.
Right.
And this is where we get back into the intention piece, because like there's this whole idea between intention and expectation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Expectation is more along the lines of I expect my husband to do this. And it's not saying that you cannot say to your husband, hey, I'm sorry, I do not appreciate you looking at porn, but to expect them to change is something that you don't have control over.
Right.
Like you don't have control over his actions, his thoughts, or anything.
Right.
But what you do have control over is making sure that you are cared for. And I think this is such a big piece that I know I forgot all about this, dealing with intense and extreme trauma. So the expectation is really putting a lot of energy and time and focus into something you don't have any control over, but you're still going to try to control that thing.
Yeah.
And this is part of the reason why it's so exhausting,
Mm-hmm.
But intention is focusing on what you do have control over. And so when you're talking about this self-care and this is my next steps, like I'm seriously going to start giving myself my needs first. That whole idea of putting your oxygen mask on first, it's a really powerful step. It's that first piece to this puzzle. You know what I mean?
Right. And I don't know if anyone listening might be having some conflicting emotions or thoughts about that, because I think generally, I know in our culture, a lot of times we're taught to be unselfish and put other people first. And it's just a great big paradox, because
Yeah.
it is so good to give to other people. But as you
Mhm.
mentioned with your oxygen mask, if you don't have that oxygen, you can't do things for other people. And I just tried to look at it through the lens of unselfish moms put themselves first, because they know that if they have done that self-care, they'll be there for their kids. And so you might need to challenge your belief system around that just a little bit and know that it
Yeah.
doesn't have to look a certain way. It's not so black and white, and you can feel what it feels like to be depleted. And that can't be the right way. And so be willing to experiment a little bit with filling up your cup so that you can be there to give to other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I know like exactly what you were saying. Like they always think of like, okay, I won't say they, like people in general, when we talk about self-care, I hear all the time, yeah, but what about love thy neighbor as thyself? Just because neighbor is the first thing mentioned doesn't mean that we forget ourselves. And I actually I've mentioned this 3 times in past episodes so far. And I'm just going to say this again. If you really, really thought about that for a second, if you're going to love your neighbor as yourself, are you going to have backyard barbecues and game nights and just a lot of laughter and being there for each other? Are you going to be that kind of neighbor? Or are you going to have like the feud wars of the century? The street wars of the century where you're throwing eggs at each other's house. You are walking over there with an axe and chopping down trees. Like, what are you guys seriously going to be doing? Because we don't think about this piece. And if you're not giving yourself love, but you think you are, and I'm getting intentional, right? With that word think with your neighbor. How can you give something you don't already have? You've got to love yourself first. You have to before anyone else.
Right.
It's so important. So important. Okay. So the other piece that we were talking about, we've just got a few minutes left here, but is this idea too that intention is actually starting that process of setting boundaries. And it takes a lot of organization, which is you're so gifted at. It takes a lot of organization to start pulling in certain boundaries. Because again, like I said, that trauma is just so good at, depleting us, and we need to put those reserves back in order.
Right.
So let's talk about like some of the boundaries and some of this organization we can put into place to make sure that the self-care and this love that we're going to start giving ourselves, these intentions of I am going to start honoring me and making sure I know what I need and what is it I'm missing, like these pieces that you've said. Great, great stuff. So what kind of boundaries and what kind of organization can we put in place to make sure those things stay firm? And so that way we actually start to build a foundation and we can start to find peace and we can start to find joy. And so that trauma is not so loud in our ears and it's not draining us like it was before.
Yeah, this is a great question. And it's one I love to answer because I think in essence, what you're asking is how do we get it done? You know, like we've got
And how does it stay done?
How do we make it be consistent? And that's why in my business, so my website's The Happy Gal, my business is The Happy Gal. And the approach that we take at The Happy Gal is what I call the Happy Gal way. It's just kind of this blend of being a professional organizer, because there's just I'm sure you know, there's this connection between your space and how you feel, and external clutter becomes internal clutter. So it's just an essential piece of well-being. Professional organizing with the mindset coaching, and we've talked about that a little bit, just kind of the beliefs that will come up and limit us. And so that's an important piece. But I think what you're asking really touches on the third piece of what I do, which is kind of the time management piece. How do we get things done? How do we manage our time? How do we be consistent and follow through? And so the blend of those things are what I call the Happy Gal way. So the Happy Gal way ports and draws on each of these resources. And so I love answering this question because how we're going to get something done, again, is just a big part of the puzzle, you know?
Yeah.
We've got this goal and this vision of what we want to do. How do we make sure we do it? And so to answer that question, the biggest thing that I highlight is just how important it is to know how to work with our brains instead of against our brains. And what I mean by that is our brains are just programmed to do what's ever easy. They don't like anything that is going to take a lot of work. They don't want to work hard. They don't want to figure things out. They like things to be really nice and predictable. And this is really important information to know, because when you're asking yourself to do something consistently, you need to think about how your brain, you can overpower your brain for a little bit. You can do some willpower, and you've probably experienced that. You know, you set a goal and you can force yourself to do it for a week or two, but everybody drops off after that, because if we're not working with our brain, if we're not partnering with our brain, if we're not figuring out a way to communicate with our brain and to play by the games that the brain wants to play with, then our efforts don't last. And so as we're asking, how do we do this consistently? We need to understand that our brain loves to do things the same way every time. And you know this. This is why habit is
it's
such
organizing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So knowing that, we can work with that. We can say, okay, my brain is going to thrive. It's going to cooperate. It's not going to make me feel like procrastinating or giving up or being discouraged or distracting me on social media or whatever else it is that the brain likes to do. It will support me if it feels easy and predictable. And so when I am asking how to implement something new into my life and make it consistent and regular, I need to recognize that if I do the same thing in the same way at the same time of day, that's going to start to become really predictable for my brain. And that is just a recipe for creating a habit. Habits work for us and they work against us. And knowing how they work, we can utilize that pattern to work for us. And so one of the most important ways that I teach my clients to implement this self-care is in a routine that I call Open the Day. And of course, this can look different for a lot of different people, depending on where you're at, how early you like to wake up, how much time you have, if you have young kids or a baby that's up during the night. I know all those things factor into it, but I really encourage my clients to open the day with some form of consistent self-care. And again, we can talk about just the 2-minute version, you know, small plus specific. You're going to start wherever you're starting. But if your brain can get in the habit of when it wakes up, it immediately goes into some form of self-care. And think about the message you're sending. You know, if before you attend to other people's needs, you're attending to your own, that symbolically, that's really important. I think it does send a message to yourself. And even if it's just for a few minutes, what it does is it starts to set that pace and that program and that routine so that your brain expects it. And when your brain expects it, it starts to crave it. And when it starts to crave it, you know, you've got a good habit. And so anytime we're implementing a new routine, one of the most important elements, I think we probably talked about this in the last episode, was a habit hook. Where you take an existing habit. You can probably explain it. We've coached before. Tell them what a habit hook is.
So it's basically like if you have something that you're already doing, you can attach another piece to this. So like an example for my habit hooks are, so first thing in the morning, I get up, I get my kids off to school, and as soon as that's done, I open up my scriptures, and then that's a habit hook because I know like, okay, habit is get the kids to school. The next thing, it's nice and quiet, read scriptures. And then after that, I open up Duolingo, I start doing Spanish, and then I'm going to take a few minutes. I'm going to read from a book just that I really, really like. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a professional development book or anything like that. It's just some time for peace, quiet, and enjoyment. And so for me, those are some like really specific habit hooks. But I will say this, as we're talking about like this whole, simple, like start simple. And we're actually getting into this brain obey, and that's the second pillar to my courses, right? Because you've got to get your brain on board.
Yes.
You totally do. You've got to get your brain on board. And I love exactly what you're saying is like, let's start creating some routines around getting your brain to get on board with you. And as you were talking, like this idea, like of overwhelm, like I'd look at my house and it's just blown up and the kids have thrown things everywhere. And one of the best ways for me to like beat that is to start simple and to do a habit hook. Like, all right, there's a sock on the floor. I can pick up that sock. I pick up that sock. That's a simple thing. And I can go see if I need to put it in the laundry or if I need to go put it in a drawer. And then I think, oh, you know what? I see another thing right there on the floor that I can pick up and put away. And before you know it, everything is picked up, organized, and clean, right?
Right.
Before you know it, that's what happens. Same thing with the dishes. Like sometimes my dish is full, my sink is full of dirty dishes. And I think to myself, oh, this is so overwhelming. I don't want to do this. But if I just pick up one spoon and wash that off, put it in the dishwasher, oh, hey, there's another one.
Yeah.
And eventually you've kind of started a thing. You know what I mean?
Sounds a little bit like start with what you know, right? You start with the first step that you see.
And it's something that's simple.
Yeah.
Any way I love the idea of any way that you can simplify things.
Well, and let's talk about that for just a second too, because I think that's a really important piece of this is you're going to have your habit hook of what will launch you into your open the day routine. And so I really love when it's the first thing you do. Now that's not always logistically possible. And you mentioned that your kids walking out the door is that hook that launches you into action. And so that's a great habit hook. We also have a guaranteed habit hook of our feet hitting the floor every morning, So that's another great way to get started on that open the day routine is just when your feet hit the floor, what's the next thing that you do? Then the other thing that's important as we're talking about the brain and cooperating with the brain is the brain needs to know exactly what it is you want it to do. If it's vague at all, again, the brain is going to look for other things to do that are easier. And so part of the process is really spelling out, okay, what are those steps in open the day? And I'm going to tell you, keep it really, really simple. I loved the example you shared about the few different things that you do, depending on where listeners are, that might be inspiring to them. It could be overwhelming to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what I'd say is think about what you can do. I have another little saying in my membership, just take 10. And I think that's a really good, as in 10 minutes. I think that's a really good time frame to give your brain to say you can do anything for 10 minutes. Maybe that sounds like too much and you just need to take 2. That's okay too. But we just want to get in that rhythm of having that be predictable and consistent and regular. So know what that's going to look like and then have a backup plan B, plan C, that's just going to make that simpler and simpler, because if you have those backup plans, then the important thing is to be really consistent. And so with those backup plans, that allows you that consistency. And with the consistency comes now this habit is created and it's easy.
Yeah, absolutely. one of the things that is like super simple, like this is something that anybody can do. And, I coach Christian women. So, of course, scriptures are very important to us, but 99% of the time, you know, we're not like I should say a lot of the people that come to me are not really active in the scriptures. And I get that. I get that. I've been there. I will say, just to kind of toot my own horn and polish my nails on my shirt, I have actually read at this point now all the standard works.
That's
Okay.
impressive. Good
Yes.
job.
So I'm really, really, really proud of that achievement. And I'm still doing it. Like this is a habit now that I've done, and I'm up to like reading 4 or 5 chapters a day sometimes. But it did not start that way.
Yeah.
To be honest, it started with me, like you said, my feet hit the floor, I go in and I use the bathroom, and I was in such a very, very low state that I could just come back and sit on the bed. And so
Mm-hmm.
I knew that was happening before I went back and laid back down. I'm gonna start crying a little bit because I like just love that girl so much, and I
Yeah.
really appreciate where she was at. But she, my next piece was actually just grabbing the scriptures, opening them, and putting my hands on them. Just opening them and putting my hands on the pages. That's it.
Right.
And eventually, it was the craziest thing. I was like, you know what? I can read one verse.
Yeah.
I can read 2 verses. And it's
That's a
really interesting.
beautiful illustration of small plus specific equals success. I think
Yeah.
there's another quote that said something like God's not interested, is more interested in your direction than your speed. And
Yes.
so how quickly you're accomplishing something is really not of interest to him. It's just what direction are you facing,
Well, and the other piece to this brain obey piece and is that the brain actually craves success.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not happy when it's not feeling successful or in charge or like you've got this.
Yeah.
It's not. And so I really honestly think like you get into certain little habits that can either, deplete the success or really increase the success. And so why just that one thing was so powerful was because my brain eventually started to see, hey, this is actually a little piece that's bringing me some joy, a little piece that's bringing me some light, a little piece that's bringing me that success. And so it started, like you said, started to crave it more. It wanted more time.
Yeah.
It wanted it, and eventually that built up into like last year I read the Old Testament. This year I'm
That's
reading the New Testament for the second time,
amazing.
and
Yeah.
that's where it's led me to. And I know the scriptures very well now, and I'm so grateful for that one little thing that I did. So I love what you're saying and how it's leading just easily and seamlessly into the brain obey piece of this. Like getting intentional literally is so very well connected to getting your brain on board with your healing. It
Mm-hmm.
is.
Yeah.
So, definitely to wrap this up, because we definitely want to be, intentional with your time as well. We mentioned like getting a vision board, and I feel like this was something that I was able to do, when I was feeling just so exhausted all the time. And it wasn't something I created overnight or in an hour. It was more or less, I kept asking myself this question: what do I want? What is it that I really want? What is it that I really want? What is it that I really want? What do I want to create? What is it? Getting that intentional piece in. And once something came up, I would go and find a picture of it and I'd stick it on that vision board, for things that I actually wanted. And it
Yeah.
helped me get more dialed in and more like if I want this, then I have to make sure I'm setting this boundary. I have to make sure that I have this piece of me organized, which is my brain space, right? I need to start doing these things, and it was really interesting. I remember the first thing I pulled off of my vision board was a pair of running shoes.
Uh-huh. I love
You know?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And it wasn't something super expensive. I think it cost me like $40 or something like that to pull the running shoes down. But $40 at that time seemed overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Overwhelming. How am I going to create $40
Mm-hmm.
for running shoes when my family needs so many other things, right? And I remember thinking to myself, oh, this is what success feels like. And I wanted it more.
That's awesome. Yeah.
You
It's
know?
that little dopamine hit the brain wants more.
Yeah. This was cool.
Well, and bringing up vision boards, I think it might also just be helpful for listeners to just talk about why a vision board is so important, why we would integrate that into this conversation. And just briefly, from my understanding, is that because we're right-brained and left-brained, our brains respond to different stimulus. And so that left
Right.
brain really likes, or that right brain really likes kind of the creative visual. And so we can say that we want something, we can write those goals down, but when there's an image of something that stimulates that part of our brain, that's the language that it speaks. And so one of my practices with my vision board, and you talked a little bit about creating it, right? That it doesn't need to be perfect all at once. You can just, as you feel the desire for something, add that image to the vision board. And it doesn't even need to be an actual board. I've seen people just kind of make a border with painter's tape on their wall and stick those images within that. Or I like to keep mine in my closet where I get dressed, and that just lets me look at that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually I've got a little piece of wall right here, and I'm like, vision board right there. Like it keeps speaking to me. So that's where the next one's going to go.
So that's great to create it, but then how do you use it? And I think we're back to kind of that question of how do we have an intention and then make it happen? And so that's a great thing. That's a great habit hook to put into your morning routine, or your open the day routine. So, maybe your routine is really simple. Maybe it's wake up, go to the bathroom, and say a prayer. And that's a fabulous routine. I think connecting with God that way is top priority. Or maybe it's doing a little bit of stretching because you need to wake your body up and that feels good. Like whatever it looks like for you, a couple jumping jacks, maybe a walk outside. But I think a really great step to work into is, if you're wanting to be intentional and create some things, start with a simple vision board and then give yourself 1 minute in front of that vision board at the end of your open the day routine and look at it and think about it and feel it, visualize it, think of all the ways it'll impact your life, because the more real it seems to you as you're looking at it, the more your brain goes to work to create that and will help you see things you can do during the day or different opportunities you would miss because it's on your mind. And so that's kind of how a vision board, I think, fits into this conversation and how you can start to use it.
Yes. And then, the piece to the organization and the boundaries piece is when you do start to create this vision board and just putting one thing up, making that into a routine, pay attention to the thoughts that come up in your mind as well. Because I know for me personally, like there was so much self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And so that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Matter of fact, I would even go so far as to say it's not true at all. But pay attention, because it'll tell you, those self-sabotaging thoughts will tell you the boundary you need to set in place. So for example, those shoes, I'm never going to get them. $40 is too expensive. What am I even thinking putting this on there? This is so stupid. It's a waste of my time. Blah, 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 blah. Like those were the thoughts that were going through my head. But it invited me to say, no. Every time, no, I can create that.
Yeah.
No, I can create that. No, I can create that.
Yeah, I think you just kind of have this struggle between where your brain, the current paradigm of your brain, which is the way things are right now, and then that vision of what you want. And there's that dissonance that's just fighting for the center stage. And so looking at that vision can kind of trigger that. And that might feel a little uncomfortable because you're having to confront those feelings and those thoughts that maybe it's not possible for you. But that's the whole point of the vision board, is to help you get into alignment with what it is you want to create, to try to let what you want win over what is right now. So if your brain can really start to accept that new paradigm of what you want, that's when you'll start to see those opportunities and know how to start to create that. And it works.
It does.
I mean, I've had so many experiences with it. My clients have had great experiences with it. My kids have had incredible experiences with vision boards. They work.
Yeah,
So
they
it's a
do.
really great tool to
Yeah.
implement.
Yes, they are. They are very much so. Jenny, thanks so much for being here and hanging out with us today again. You will definitely be asked on again because you're just so awesome and so wise. And so many pieces of what you teach really do make such an impact on people who are dealing with trauma, because these ideas and like putting in these boundaries in this organization, your next steps, this is so important to healing trauma. So thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Do you have any final thoughts?
I just have such a respect for people that show up in their lives. It's really easy to give up, but I think it's pretty amazing the way we just all keep showing up. I mean, listening to this podcast is proof that you're showing up.
Yeah.
So if you just keep showing up, you're going to make it through this. So just keep doing it. And so grateful and inspired to be a part of this circle and love the work you're doing. So thanks so much for all you're doing for this audience.
Thank you. Almost got me in tears. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. I'll see you next week. Bye. Hey, fabulous listener. I have a question for you. How done with trauma are you? Are you ready to uplevel your life and start creating the dreams that you thought were out of your reach? Are you ready to be free of the choices of other people? Are you ready to start living a life for yourself and creating the dreams that you want? And are you ready to start attracting relationships that show up to support those dreams? Are you also ready to create an amazing and deep love and trust in yourself and your decisions? If this is an absolute yes, then I want to invite you to come and join my 7-day Unashamed Chalk Talk. In this 7-day course, we are going to be going over each one of the 7 pillars for living an unashamed and completely self-trustful life. You will have some very quick, very concise, but powerful assignments to do every day. Plus, you also get access to me live for 7 days. You are going to get to learn how to set the goals that you want to achieve in your life completely unashamed, and also how to figure out what it is that's out of alignment in your life and stopping you from achieving those goals. Then we're going to get into how to get your brain to actually listen to the things that you want and start working on creating them. And also how to give yourself permission to truly love and care for yourself in an amazingly, fabulously fun way. And also how to regain the confidence and love that you deserve to give yourself, despite what anyone else thinks, says, or does about you. Now I can almost hear you say, okay, well, that sounds great, but how much does it cost? That is also an exciting part of this. It's only $97. How awesome is that? For only $97, you can start creating the changes you want. There's literally no reason for you to not click on the link in the description below and get started. Come join me today in the Unashamed
Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me today and listening in on this podcasting episode. Don't forget to tune in next week. It's going